Greetings to everyone again. Welcome to another session in our Azure series, where we continue to build practical knowledge around Microsoft Azure and real-world cloud solutions. So my name is Olive Okaku, and I'm a cloud computing engineer. And I have with me Paul Oborefo, who is also a cloud computing engineer. So for today's session, we are very excited to have Madam Titi Lokwe-Bello with us. So she's a technical manager, a Microsoft Certified Trainer, which is MCT, and a Microsoft 365 Azure Subject Matter Expert. She's someone that I personally admire for her hard work, her consistency, and commitment to excellence in the tech space, right? So over the years, she has built strong experience across Microsoft technologies and has helped teams and organizations adopt cloud solutions the right way. So for today's session, she'll be walking us through Microsoft's Azure Policy, helping us understand how to apply governance and standards effectively in our Azure environment. So please join me in warmly welcoming Madam Titi Lokwe-Bello, our mother in tech. So Madam Titi, please have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this. How would I say it? Okay, I think you have said all about me, but thank you so much. I hope I'm audible and clear enough.
Yes, ma'am, you are. You are
All
very
right.
clear.
Thank you. And I'm very, very happy to be here today. And I'm happy to meet even our learner who are joining us on the call. You guys have been doing a great job, and I'm hoping we can take it all together to greater heights, right? You have well said a lot about me. I'm somebody that loves to teach. I love when it's time. I'm an introvert, right? But when it's time to talking in terms of technology or teaching, you can you will be begging for me to stop, right? So, but enough of all of that. I would like to just jump right into the topic of today, which is Azure Policy, right? Azure Policy in the series of the Azure topics that we have been having so far. Today, we are going to be talking about this essential and very important part of Azure, which is actually Azure governance, right? Azure Policy fall under Azure governance. Okay. So, in case you're wondering what it is, we will try as much as possible to break it down for you, and we'll also see practical application of it, right, within an Azure environment. And maybe before I continue, I'd like to ask just a quick question, right? I'm wondering, or have been wondering, if you, as a person, has ever seen an Azure environment where everyone deploys whatever they like, right? Wherever they like it. And just let me know, indicate. I know some of us are beginners, but I also like to ask maybe Paul or Olive, any one of you can contribute to let me know. Have you come across an environment where people just create, just because they have access to credit, they just create resources in whatever region they feel like they want to create it without taking anything in terms of governance into consideration? Have you?
No, ma, not at all.
All right. Yes. As time goes on, as an IT professional, these are scenarios that you will face at one point or the other within your organization. There are challenges that an administrator or a developer, just because he's been given access to the to this Azure subscription environment, and he said, "Oh, there's a lot of credit," or sometimes they don't even have a view to the credit that is available to them, but they just kept creating resources. Now, when it comes to governance, there are things that have to be put into perspective. For instance, region is very important. In our side of the world, right? Even it applies not only in Nigeria space, it applies everywhere where you have certain data that cannot be hosted or that cannot be hosted, yes, in any other region other than the region where you are or where your business operates, right? So those are governance issues. And sometimes our engineers, they go ahead to create resources without minding the cost. For instance, a developer who wants to start developing an application, you gave him access, please go ahead and create the resource that you need. And the developer, while creating the app service that you require, he picked the most expensive or the one that he feels is going to give him the fastest speed, right? Without considering, this is just a development environment and not a production environment. And with that, the organization can incur a lot of cost, right? They will pay so much for just that development environment. So these are a few governance problems that we have within the Azure environment. Now, Azure policy, what it does, right? It exists majorly to help make sure that any Azure environment where policies are being created don't run into what we call chaos, right? So today in this session, I will be showing us how Azure can help you, or Azure policy can help you to enforce rules automatically without shouting at the developers or without manually checking resources that they are using. So that is what we are going to be looking at today. So what we are going to cover. We will be looking at briefly introducing you to Azure Policy. We'll look at the core components and structures of Azure Policy. We'll look at the common use cases, right? In what scenario, in what instances will you be applying Azure Policy within your Azure environment? And then we'll look at hands-on creating and managing Azure policies within Azure. And if time permits, we'll look at best practices and practical tips, right, for anyone who is just beginning or learning to understand Azure. So, I've said already, yeah. So by the end of this particular session today, you'll be going home with an understanding of Azure policy in a very simple term, right? You will be going home with an understanding of how it fits within the Azure governance. And then you will actually be able to assign policy by yourself if you have an environment that you can try your hands on. So that is our objective for today's session. Now, let's look briefly into what Azure policy is all about. Okay. Azure policies, like I've said before, it plays a very critical role in cloud governance. How does it do this? It does this by ensuring organizational structure or organizational standards are consistently enforced. So it ensures organizational standards are consistently enforced. In case you are wondering, what are organizational standards? For instance, we have the finance industry or the finance sector. There are governance policies that is guiding their businesses in the country or in any region that they operate. Some of these policies can include any data or customer data must be located within the country or region within the country or region where that particular financial institution is operating. Standards can be, an employee or a user of your services have the right to ask you for their data to be deleted. A lot of you might have heard what we call GDPR. You must have heard what we call NDPR. We might have heard what we call maybe IPA for health infrastructure in health sector. There is that for the financial sector. So those are standards, right? Organizational standards that organizations must follow. And for them to be able to practice those standards, for them to be able to meet it, they have to set policies. They have to set controls or put controls in place and ensure that those controls are being followed and adopted and applied within an environment. Now, after you have set up a policy, what will you be doing? The next thing is you want to see how people are applying it. Are they violation? Violation means where services or people are just intentionally not following the policy that has been put in place, right? Example can be, let's say, for instance, an organization that says every employee, before you go on leave, you must give a minimum 2 months notice, for instance. And then you realize that people just book their leave a day to their leave starting, and yet somebody is approving it. So the policy that says you must give a notice of 2 weeks is not being followed. They are being violated within the system. So now, when it comes to Azure and Azure policy, there is the policy that has been configured or created to enforce the standard, and there is what we call automated violation detection, where the system will check how are people using the services. Are there people who are their services, are there settings that are not complying with the policies that are in place. So it's going to detect them, and it also has the ability to do what we call remediation. Remediate it by applying or forcing the policy that we have created to take effect. For instance, if we have configured a policy or created a policy that says anyone creating a virtual machine at all in Azure cannot create virtual machine outside of Europe region, for instance. By the time somebody want to create somebody want to create a new VM, if they pick US region, it's going to fail. It's going to stop. It will not create because they are violating that policy. Automatically, it will tell them they are not allowed to create resources in this region. Now, what about situation whereby the policy or resources have been created before the policy was applied? The system have the capability to scan the entire system and check resources, existing resources that have been and are violating this policy. And then it's going to force the owner, by the time they log in the next time, it will force them to apply the policy or to apply those settings that the policy permit. But there are some that you can also apply by themselves. Right, then you have a dashboard, a compliance dashboard, where you can view or visualize how the policies are being applied, the status, the violation, more like reports, and check the overall posture of a particular policy that has been put in place. Okay, so when it comes to Azure policy, there are key concepts or terminologies that you must be familiar with, right? One is the policy. What are policy? Policies themselves in Azure, they define specific rules, right? Specific rules and effects to enforce on resources. Specific rules and effects, or let's just call it rules, that must be enforced on resources, such as one, like I said earlier, allowed locations. If we say you can only create resources in the Europe region, maybe West Europe, or if we pick Europe generally, it means you can create in the West Europe, you can create in the South Europe, you can create in the East Europe. If we say the location allowed in South Africa, it means you cannot create any resource outside of South Africa. So policies contain set of specific rules, right, to manage resources like location, like configurations, right? While we also have what we call initiatives, where's my yes, it's my laser pointer. Yeah, we have what we call initiatives as well, right? Initiatives are simply grouping multiple policies together. Right? Initiative, they are simply grouping multiple policies together. We group multiple policies. This is the key word. We are grouping them together. It's not one single policy. It is multiple policy that is becoming an initiative. Now, this, again, you have policy. Policy are a set of rules, that is allowing or denying certain configuration to exist while creating resources. Now, a policy can be a set, but when we say definition, what does this definition mean itself? The definition itself is in a policy. Let's see, we have this policy. Inside this policy, we have rule 1, right? Rule 1 says location. Okay, location is rule 1. And then you have rule 2 saying the price, the maximum or the highest price that you can use within that location is what rule 2 is saying. Rule 3 is saying for user to log into maybe that resource, they must use a particular credential type, right? Those are different rules. Those rules become, when you group multiple rules together, they become a set. And that set is what makes up a policy. Why you group multiple policies together, they become what we call an initiative, right? Initiative, again, they are multiple policies, and they are created to streamline governance and ease management within Azure resources. Then you have compliance monitoring. This, what it does is to just track. It tracks the policy that has been created and reports the application. Report which resource is complying with that policy and which resource are not complying currently, right? That is what those are the key concept, or that's the concept of policy application within Azure. Then, what are the importance, right, of policy, of Azure policy? Now, Azure policy, like we say, it helps organizations, or it is critical for organizations aiming to maintain governance in a dynamic cloud environment, right? Because the cloud is evolving, there are technologies evolving and things are changing very rapidly. And when you adopt cloud, you look at one thing is speed. You get speed with creating resources, provisioning resources, access, everything. So how do you manage? How do you ensure that even while people, your users are working, your customers are accessing your resources, the resources they are accessing, the data within your tenant or your Azure environment, they are secure and they are fully governed. And you are able to do what we call mitigation of risk. So Azure policy is helping to set governance and then mitigate risk within an environment, within an Azure environment. It also helps an organization to meet auditing and compliance requirements. I talk about HIPAA the other time. I talk about GDPR. So Azure policy can help organizations or enhance compliance within organization with standards like ISO certification, right, and enabling faster audit readiness. So if the government or the have given set a particular standard of operation for your business, and you're using Azure and you're aware of this standard, you set up Azure policy to help you meet some of those standards. By the time you are doing audits a lot of time, the auditors will ask for verification. They will ask you for the policy that you have created. They will ask you for how are users meeting them? What are the evidence, right, that you are applying those policies, or that those policies are actually being applied. So Azure policy allow you to be able to get ready for your audit, right? And reduce the risk or the stress of you looking for data here and there. Then when we talk about configuration management, Azure policy also reduces configuration drifts, right? In a situation where you have to set up a policy, a resource in Azure, and you want every resource to be tagged. For instance, if you are within a large organization where they have subsidiaries, or they have larger other departments, they have the finance department. Finance have their own applications that they usually use. So finance might request a virtual machine to host their application. You have your developers who are developing apps for your business. They will need apps, database access. They will need app source, app service plan. They will need a lot of things to run your applications and build their code or write their code, test it, and deploy it to production, right? You can configure Azure policy to help you enforce things like tagging. You can say a tag can be, a tag can tell you who has that resource, who is using it, what is it used for, what location is it in, right? What type of resource it is. So those are kind of configuration that you can use policy to push. And when you have all of this in place, you will prevent your Azure environment from drifting away from the configuration or recommended configuration for your environment. That is majorly. Now let's look at I think I've already talked about this. My slide is kind of duplicated, kind of. But again, right now, let's look at very quickly again. We talk about core components of Azure. One of it is policy definition. Policy definition here now. A policy is a set of codes or set of rules that is defined within a JSON file. You can actually create a policy, you can export it and even take it to another Azure environment. And you can bring from another Azure environment and come and import it and then apply it within your environment. So the definitions are usually a JSON file. They are usually JSON files that then specify the conditions and effects for resources or for resource governance within Azure. Then you have parameters. Parameters allow reuse and customization of policies across different resources and environment, right? That's parameters again in definition. They allow the reuse and customization across resources. This way, they are enabling what we call scalable governance. So where you have to be redefining recreating rules again and again, you can actually reuse those rules within the Azure environment. For example, right, a policy that allowed VM sizes uses parameters to specify the size, right? It uses parameter to specify the size. Parameters will now be okay. A key pair value, right? Where you have size, then you equals size equals what do you want the size to be? Maybe a V2 or DV3 or D3 V1 or V3. Those are how you define parameters, right? So this way, it's easily tailored per department or even environment. And then it creates what we call modularity, right? It supports modular and flexible and flexibility within your environment. So this way, you will not have any need to start creating multiple rules and creating duplicate rules within your environment. That is just simply how I can put policy definition. Now, we talk about initiative the other time as well. Initiative, again, it aggregates multiple related policies into a single unit, simplifying management and reporting. For instance, right, a security initiative may bundle policies for encryption. It may bundle policy. Part of the policy in that bundle can be network security groups, and part can be auditing. Part can be maybe enabling comprehensive enforcement of security best practices, right? So grouping of these various policies together now is what becomes initiative, right? And what it does at the end of the day is to improve scalability and clarity in policy administration across whether complex or simple cloud environments. I want to, so that we can go to the demo aspect of it and see how they work. Now, what happens after a policy has been defined? Will you define policy and just leave it hanging? So one of the things that you also need to be aware of is what we call assignments, right? Policy assignments. And for you to assign policy, you can assign policy at different levels. So assignments, right? What it does is apply that policy or initiatives to specific scope. Scope, where we said now, I want to believe you guys have gone through scoping or management grouping or management scope within on Azure. I want to believe you have created that topic. Or if you have not, we can look at it sometime in the future to break it down. But I'll just try to talk a little bit about it. Now, when you have your Azure tenants, there's what we call management scope or Azure management within or structure within Azure. The global administrator have the let me bring it up. There's a global administrator. Let's say it's like this. You have your Azure standing here. Under this, you can have, this is the tenant, right? In this tenant, you can have maybe 3 subscription or 3 management groups. This is the overall management group, parents, right? This parent group. This parent group. Under this parent, we will now have sub group here. We can have a management group for, let's make it simple. We can have a management group for developer, right? Dev team here. We can have one for IT, right? And we can have one for maybe general business. Any other group. That's just an example. General business or GB. Okay, GB. Right. In each of these management groups, we can have sub, or we now have subscriptions. Under this dev, we can have subscription for development, for production, for testing, or UAT. Yeah, under IT, we may have maybe 2 subscriptions. We can have maybe for production, and we can have for lab. And for the general, maybe here is where you have things for finance, right? Maybe you have for marketing, they have their app too, and you have for HR. Okay. Now you have the parent here, which is the top scope here. Then you have this subscope, 3 subscope here. Now under each of these subscope is where you now have your various subscriptions that you have purchased, right? So this segment here is what they call management group or management scope or the scope. Any policy you apply from here travels down. Any that you apply from here travels down, right? But it will never go up. It will always come down, but not go up, right? So those are what they call scope or scoping within Azure. Now, I think I've been able to explain here now, assigning the policy level, and then scoping, tailoring the policy or the policy enforcement only where it is relevant. If we want the policy developers, we don't want them to just be creating resources with high-end machines. We can apply policy just from this scope to everything developer is doing, right? That is a way to tailor it. And then we can then see, because we are tailoring it, the scoping enable effectiveness. Where a developer cannot create a resource that costs more than maybe $100 per month, an IT may be able to create a resource that can go as far as $200 per month, right? Those are scoping, and those are areas where you say, I need to apply different policy to these people, different policy to IT, different policy, and different policy to the parent itself. But note, any policy you apply at the top level or the root level will always travel down. Just note that. Okay. Just to check, I want to check that there are no questions or somebody calling my attention for anything. All right. Do we have any questions so far before I continue?
On my end, Pastor, no, I don't have any question.
All right. All right. Thank you. So I will just continue very quickly. Now, I know in the course of speaking, we must have talked about a few scenarios where we can apply them, right? Sorry, let me remove this my where we can apply them. Yes, I've removed it. Okay. So now here we have, for instance, these are practical application of or use case scenarios where policies can be applied again or enforced. One, tagging. It's a very good example. Like the diagram we drew just now at the top. Right, let me go back a step. Hope I've not told you. Hope I've not there. Okay, here. You remember we have parent, we have dev, we have IT, we have general usage. Now, if I go to common usage scenario, we can enable tagging and we can enable configure policy to force naming convention, right? Tagging, again, is helping to improve resource management. This way, you can use tagging for cost tracking. So at the end of the month, you want to know how much are developer or the development arm of the business, how much are they consuming, how much are they using, how much are they spending, right? This at the same time, what is IT costs? That's IT. They're setting up the Active Directory, every other resources server that they're spinning up in Azure. How much are they spending monthly? And when you look at maybe HR or the general tool, how much are everybody spending? So if you tag the resources, you can actually go to Azure, search by tag, and it will bring all the resources that have that tag. It will bring all of them out. Maybe a tag is to say owner IT, owner dev team, owner general. If you search for owner IT, it will bring every resource that have that tag. It will bring them all out. And you can see the cost by going to cost analysis, and you'll be able to see how much IT alone is spending, right? So that's practical aspect. What about naming? You don't want people to create a resource in Azure and just call it test one, or they create a VM and call it my computer, or you want the name, as you're seeing the name, is even already telling you who has it or who is using it or what is the purpose for. So you can also configure policy to say when somebody creates Azure resources, remember, example of naming convention, if you have taken notes, when you are creating a resource in Azure, there's a check mark. When you put a name, it will check. It will give you a check mark and tell you that name, whether that name exists or not. But without a check mark, it means if you don't have that check mark to go ahead or to proceed, it will tell you that name already exists or the name is already in use. It doesn't mean the name is in use in your own environment, but there are, as people are creating resources on the internet in Azure environment, Azure will check everywhere, is to be able to ensure uniqueness of names within global Azure environment. And that's to tell you, even Microsoft themselves, they put certain policies in place that prevent you from using some names, because some names have been used by other people, while some are reserved for Microsoft to use by themselves. So those are practical examples of how you enforce policy within your environment, right? Now, there was a recent study, right, that was carried out or conducted, right, recently, where that had to do with leveraging Azure policy within environment, and it actually it produces or help organizations to gain between 20 to 30% improvement when it comes to resource discovery and billing within Azure. That's how much it helps organizations to for resource identification and billing identification and improvement when it comes to you searching for resources and getting it delivered on time, or making it discoverable within Azure environment. I think I might have been taking so much time trying to explain. For what I want to do now is probably to jump into my browser, and let's see the practicality of Azure policy, how we can apply them within our Azure environment. So I have an environment here I'm going to bring up. This my own Azure environment, and have this subscription. So what we are going to do very quickly is to see step by step of how we can quickly apply the policy, right? And we're going to create policy and apply it. So you can search when you want to create policy. You can just search on the global. That's looking at the global search here in your subscription. Just search for Azure policy. Yeah, before you will see it as Azure policy, but now Azure just call it policy. So this is it here. I'm going to click to open it up. You bear with my internet. So you remember one of the things that we said is you have a compliance dashboard that show you the policy compliance, how you are complying or how your resources are complying within your environment. Currently, I do not have any policy configured or created within this environment, right? And then if I have, this is where you will see them. You'll see policy compliance, how many is in compliance and the one not in compliance. If you have applied initiative, this is where you will also see at a glance, right? You can see and you can edit the card to include what you want to see and what you don't want to see at a glance. Then, if there are remediations that have been configured and resources that needed to be remediated, right, you will see them here. If anyone is pending, and the compliance currently is 100%. It will be 100% because I do not have anything, any policy, right? But if, let's say, out of 5 policy, 4 are compliant, that's about 80%, right? So that's the way where you see the policy compliance right within the environment. So now I'm expanding the authoring here, right? Under the authoring, you have definition, you have assignment, okay? If we go to definition, right, you are going to see a lot of policies. Now, there are policy types. When it comes to policy in Azure, there are policy types. There is the custom policy, and there are Microsoft defined policy, or default policy and custom policy, right? Default and custom policy. Again, there's another type that is called whether it's static, whether it's built-in. Just those 2 major types is what you have, right? So what we can do first is to look at a few policy definitions that are here. Each of these that you are seeing here, they are JSON file. They are JSON file, and you have so many of it. Currently, you have 3,342 policies existing within my environment without me creating it. So these are policies that come out of the box as you sign up for your Azure subscription. So we can even search already. We might see things. Let's look at tags. You see, all of these policies now that we are seeing here, they have one relationship or the other with tagging, resource tagging. Look at this. It said append a tag and its value to resources. Let's look at this. Inherit a tag from subscription. Or let's look at this append. Or require, yeah, this best one. Require a tag. Look at it. Tag. Category type is tag. So let's look at this. Let's edit this one. Require a tag. Now, looking at this particular policy definition, right? We have a name for it. We have a version for it. And then you have a little bit of description. It says enforces a required tag and its value. Does not apply to resource groups, only resources. So it means if you apply this policy or you assign this policy, what it means is whenever anybody want to create a resource and there's no tagging, it's going to force them, it's going to ask them to put a tag before they can save it. If they don't put a tag, see, available effect is denied when there's no tag specified for a resource that is being created. It will deny the creation of that and it will tell them that you require a tag or your organization require a tag. Now, let's look at the definition. If you notice the display name, this section is the property of the policy itself, right? The display name again, as we have all of this information that we have up here, is what you still have here. If we go further, parameter starts from here, right? This is parameter tab. If I go to parameter tab, yes. So, but I'm going to go back to the definition. Now, from the parameter aspect, can we zoom this thing up? No. Okay. So, from the parameter aspect, let's look at it from parameter. Now, yeah, from parameter, you will see, say tag name, right? Is it what tag name? Need to put a name. What is the type? It should be a string. A string means you have to type something, right? You have to type something in. Then tag value will also be a string. So it can be a name value. It can be, there's no limitation of how long it can be. Nothing is limiting that. So then this is now the policy rule. This is a rule now. If, right? If check the policy will run, if apply or if tag is specified to allow. These are if not, then statement. If not, then statement. That's what the rule look like. This is just the rule. So you will check the resource that the person is creating. If it has, it will pass. If it does not have, right, the field is going to, for instance, this is a tag, parameter, tag name. It will ask them to set tag name to prompt them. Then equals to, the equals to is the tag value. That's the response. So when we are setting now, we might put and say the tag name, it should be the tag name can be, let's say tag should be a string, tag name display. Sorry, let's say the tag name now is location, right? Tag name is location. Or let us say the tag name is owner. If we put owner, you will select it and then you have to put a value. And the value will now be IT or developer. And if the person refuses to put, then deny, right? Deny the person access. This policy, this can be as long as you want. It can contain multiple rules. This is just a single rule. It can contain multiple rules within a policy. Remember, we'll talk of policy sets, right? So these are example, or this is an example of policy. So let's see quickly how we can assign a tag. Let's assign to a resource group. Go back. We have a resource group available. Let's see. I think I might have some resource groups, but create a new one. Let's create one here. Create a resource group and call it. You can call it AZ series. Or underscore series. Okay. And we want to, this region is okay, West Europe. And I click next. So here, I can already create tags. right? If tags already exist, I will select. This ones already exist, I will select. And I can add other tags. You notice, as you select, it will give you room or option to add further tags, right? So, but let's say we want to use it for costs. Let's look at costs. Sorry, the value is costs, and that's the name. Cost center. We can say again. I think I'm sorry. Then say 00 is the value, because the resource group does not contain anything. It doesn't contain cost. It doesn't consume cost rather. And then we can click next just to see the summary of it. And we click create. This is simply creating. We have just created a resource group and assigned a tag to that resource group. So now that the resource group is ready, we want to enforce tagging, right, on that resource group. We have this resource group here, AZ series, right? And we go back to policy again. Go back to policy again, policy. And we'll go back to authoring and definition. So we're going to set the require tag again. Tag. Require tag on resources. And it's valid. Okay, so select this. Okay, remember we talked about this earlier. We tried to break it down. Now, sign. So let's select this. We've already, the information is already defined. So what we are saying is we require a tag, remember. Check, you need to check. These are the parameter. Tag name, to set a tag name. And you can also predefine the tag names, like I said earlier. But you can ask the person or the creator to set the tag name since they know what they want to do, right? Or what the stuff is for. So we are going to just create assign. And yeah, the scope now. This is the only subscription we have in this environment. You know, we talked about scope earlier. We only have this subscription. So we're applying to this subscription. And this subscription is currently at the management level. But we are only applying to the subscription, not the management level. So then we need to specify the resource group. We want it apply on the resource group. Let's expand this resource selection. I'm expecting to have my back to basic. Okay. Oh, all right. So select apologies. So now the management level, here at the management level, if you notice, the subscription is at this level, right? We have other management level that we have created. We have HR, we have land, but the subscription is currently here. So I'm going to select the subscription here, and I'm going to select the resource group that I want this policy to affect, resource group, right? And I'll say select, okay? So this policy is going to apply to just the resource group. Collapse this. Now assignments assignment name, require a resource tagging. Let's give it something like this, require cost center tag, and it's valid, right? I have a description also that has been created. Still fast. Yes, and I'm enabling the policy enforcement. I'm enabling it, right? And then I'm going to go to next page, which is under my parameter now. So for my parameter, I'm going to give a tag name. To give a tag name. Yeah, then the tag value is 00. Remember what we defined on the resource book earlier. Okay, and so we just click next. So here now, by default, this assignment will only take effect on newly created resources. Take note, on newly created resources. Existing resources can be updated via the remediation. Remember when I was talking about it, I said, as people are creating new resources, it will force them. But existing resources will, based on if you have applied, is going to ask somebody to take effect or to apply those tags later. Or based on remediation that we have configured, policy that we have configured, is going to automatically set the remediation. If it's something you cannot apply by itself, it will prompt somebody to apply it when next somebody log in and try to access that particular what's it called, resource, right? So, but we are not going to configure any remediation right now. We're going to leave it as it is, and we will go next, or except, yeah, we're okay. We'll go next. Now, this next is talking about managed identity. So policies which be deployed if not exist, and modified effects types need the ability to deploy resources on a edit tag on existing resources respectively. We'll also leave it for now, because when you are creating remediation check, you also need to consider the identity of the service that is applying the remediation, because this is Azure that is doing it now. So you need to be authorized somehow. So you need to create, you take a further step by creating app, going to define app, app registration. Yes, you create app registration to give it access to the particular subscription resources that you want it to be able to do. So we just go next, and then this is message for non-compliance. So we can put a message here. By default, it will tell them and say require a tag, or you can customize the message if you want to, right? To give maybe employee or people that are trying to create, to give them the ability or more information about what we're trying to do. So we can say you must add a tag to create this resource. Failure to do so means no resource for you. Okay, then we can click next to review all the settings that we have put in place, and we can click create. Okay, so it's creating the policy for us, and it has finished creating very fast. So now it has finished creating. Let's see. Parameters. And we have just simply created a policy. In the process, we created a policy, and in the process, or there's already a policy definition. What we have done is to kind of apply the policy to a resource or a resource group. Now, to test whether the policy we just created, whether it's okay, we're going to create, we'll go into that, let's create storage account. Storage. Let's create a storage. This last one, sorry, go back. So I go into the subscription, and we'll go into the resource group. Click create. This is the resource group. Sorry, going back. We're going into resource group itself. I'll click create. Create and look for storage. Although we can come from the other side where we came from too before, just searching the global and clicking, looking for storage account. So what we'll do, this is Azure storage account. I will click create a storage account. Okay, it has already selected our resource group. Now, storage account name, we can give it AZ series storage contain only lower cases. STRG, right? AZ series storage and prefer storage type. Let's call it blob storage. It's okay. Primary workload. This is just call it for data backup performance. Standard tier is fine. And then redundancy, you can leave it as this. Then is there tag anywhere here? Not yet. We get to the tag section in the front here. So what we will do is, because the purpose here is majorly to apply the tag. So we just click next, next, or yes, next, next. We won't apply any tag here. This is the tag. Then we'll click next. Validation in progress. Oh, great. So now there's an error. It means we cannot create this particular storage. And what is the error? Let's look at it. Okay, great. The error says resource Azure AZ3 was disallowed by policy. By policy, code require request disallow, right? By policy. Then if we look at, let's see, reason, you must, can you see? You must add a tag to create this resource. Failure to do so means no resource for you, right? That's the reason why this creation is going to fail in the first place. And that is the policy that we just apply on the resource group. So the only way for us to create this resource is to actually apply a tag, right? That's the only way. So for us to go further, let's go to the tag and then we select cost center, right? 00. So we can put cost center 00. This is more like like sorting code. So it's not that it's cost, like sorting code is what this means. So now let's do review again. It will pass now because now we've assigned a tag to it. And we see, now we can go ahead to create this particular resource. Let's create. So that's one way for you to actually set a policy or enforce policy within an environment. Another one, why this is creating, right? Another one can be to enforce encryption. When we go to the encryption section of that storage account that we just created, we didn't do anything on it. But let's say we have also created a policy or assigned a policy that forces encryption. We'll have to select the encryption option under that tab as well. So I know that we have kind of overspilled the time. And then in case, do we have, oh, all right. So I think, do we have any question so far? We have just created a resource and we can see the resource that we have created. Right, do we have any questions so far?
From my end.
Okay. So I think, yes, also because of time, right, just for us to quickly see the resource that we have created. This is the resource we just created. This is our resource group. Sorry, this is the resource we just created, and you can see the cost, the tag value. So let's say I just go home now. I want to know who are the people that are using that, or how much at the people that are using a particular tag. So we can look for cost center. Cost center is a tag. Service. Okay. Now let's go to tags. So in tags, we have all the tags that have been defined. So we can click this guy. When we click it, we'll see the resources. This is the resource group, and these are the resources within that. So let's say we want to know how the person is, how much they are using, right? Manage view, how much they are using. I'm trying to see because we do not have so much here. Okay, just a moment. Anyone, or let's just say, okay, anybody that have this tag, this particular tag now, we can see all the resources within the particular, that have the particular tag. And this way we can know what a particular department, a particular business is actually using within our Azure environment. Now we're going to bring the session to a close here today, but this is one of the practical examples of applying tag to resources in Azure. So Olive, I'm going to pass the mic back to you, as this is the end of this particular session. Probably
thank
our
you
next.
very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so
Thank you
much
very
for giving
much.
me the
Like, this was
opportunity.
really, really insightful. Like, this was really insightful. Thank you for breaking it down. I learned a lot. Like, personally, I learned a lot. Like, policy definition, policy assignment, the scope, initiative. I learned a lot. Thank you very much for breaking this down. It was really awesome. Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much
much.
once again for having you.
I needed to speak to, like, I needed to just say I learned a lot. So to be honest, like everything from the beginning to the end. Thank you very much, man.
Thank you. Thank you
And
for having me.
we see the
I
two
don't mind.
guys turn up.
Yes, and I would love to also take part in future topics. So just let us know as topics are available for us to contribute to the community. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So before we wrap up, I would like to share like a good news, or rather some good news to the listeners, to people that are watching. So this won't be the only time we'll be learning from Madam Titi Lope-Bello. She'll be joining us more often in this our Azure series. So there'll be many more opportunities to benefit from her wealth of knowledge, experience, and insights in our upcoming sessions. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you. To have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.
Okay.